Hello, dear viewers. In this series of interviews of talking about Japan with people overseas, we sometimes encounter the question of where we really stand. That is maybe because we have encountered so many changes in the past 40 years since the war. Japan is an Asian country, but clearly we are bigger than that. We are probably much beyond this particular region. And we have also very long tradition as a country, but there are relatively few things in our daily life that will speak about our own tradition. And also in the past, we have done our best to catch up with the West, but now we have already succeeded catching up with the West. As a matter of fact, with this sharp rise of the Japanese yen, we are now more fluent, more affluent than most countries. So it is natural, I think, that we have asked ourselves where we really stand. So today we would like to talk about this problem with a journalist who is also much interested in this problem. He is Mr. Jean-Jacques Vellino, editor-in-chief of Tokyo Journal, an English quality magazine published in Tokyo. Mr. Vellino, it's nice to have you in this program.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Before talking about our own identity, would you briefly reveal your own identity?
Well, my own identity is, as my name give it up already, I'm Italian from origin and Swiss from nationality. I was born in Switzerland.
This is a standard question that I ask every guest. How and when did you first get interested in Japan?
It must be in my early 20s when, because I'm interested in poetry, was studying haiku, basho, and others, and then moved on to philosophy, which always was an interest of mine here in Japan, and I got involved in Zen Buddhism studies, and this is really what got me started in Japan.
Mm-hmm. How long have you been working in this country?
Now it's close to 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Now you are the editor-in-chief of this Tokyo Journal. This is one of the recent issues. It is certainly, it has a very interesting cover on it. Could you also briefly tell us what kind of magazine this is?
Yeah, this is, as you said earlier on, this is an English-speaking magazine, and it's a Japanese-published English-speaking magazine. Mm-hmm. And it's probably the only one in Tokyo for the time being, which is sort of well-known in terms of whereabouts and informations about the society. And what we'd like to do with Tokyo Journal is having it as a forum, as a sort of exchange place where people can come and exchange their impressions, right or wrong, but their impressions on the country, on the Japanese themselves, from other foreigners, and so vice versa.
I see. So it is essentially to report on Japan and talk about Japan to the non-Japanese readership.
Yes, for the time being, as I think it's probably true, although we have an extensive Japanese readership and very loyal one. We'd like the Japanese also, of course, to come more through Tokyo Journal expressing what they feel and who they are.
So I believe that you are always interested in what's happening in Japan, what Japanese have in mind, and so forth. So coming into the main subject of the discussion, how are Japanese generally perceived, viewed in foreigners' eyes? It's a big question from the start.
This is a big question, but it's a quite interesting one. Let me tell you maybe a little bit how we perceive it. Mm-hmm. I studied Japanese society and people over the last 20 years, so it was interesting to see in development. But what really occurred to me before I came here, and now is even more so, is that I am used to say that Japan or Japanese people are viewed from outside as a silhouette with no face. What I'm saying by this is that what we see in places that face is television, cars, technology.
We are very often called faceless giant.
Or
We are
faceless
giant
giant.
economically, but we
That's
do
right.
not have much individual features. Is that what you mean?
No, that's not at all what I mean. What I mean is that somehow either we've not been interested in the right things about Japan, or Japan has not been perceived or has not been pushed by themselves to the outside world so that we can put a face to that giant faceless person. What I'm saying basically is, although Japan translates absolutely everything that is published in the West, or actually in the whole world, and we all know how many publications we can find here. What we do publish, or what we do translate from Japanese writings, generally speaking, in the West, is absolutely minimal. In our country, we might have even second class type of stars or writers. You know them here. We don't know even your heroes and legendary stars here. We never heard of them.
The dominant image that is projected of Japan overseas is that of our economic products.
That's right.
Electronic, automobile, as you mentioned.
It is basically how you lost the war but won the peace. This is what we know, but we don't know who you are, basically. This is it.
Having lived in Japan for 2 years, do you think that image that the people have outside of Japan is justified? Looking from inside also?
I don't think I would have stayed if it was justified. I think it's entirely unjustified. What is justified, though, is that they cannot seize the Japanese face because, of course, as I said, I suggest it's not even pushed by Japanese themselves, out of shyness, out of many different reasons. But it's total difference. I feel Japanese are very warm people, much deeper than it appears at first contact because of environmental behaviors, which are really different between Asia and the West, but then further apart between Japanese and the West. We feel many times that Japanese are very superficial because we can't get in to what is your environmental structure. But once you've reached a point and crossed that barrier, then I feel that the image we have not is unfortunately the one we should try to find out more and more out of the West.
So let me ask you this way. The image that we project overseas may be that of our economic production. Having lived in Japan, how do you think we are different from, let's say, people in the West?
Well, this is again very interesting. I think that there is a uniqueness, as we probably remember. We talked about two different schools. You have, for instance, one school of a friend of mine, a man called Gregory Clark, who claims that Japanese are absolutely unique, period. And then there's another school which claims, like, for instance, Robin Gill, that Japanese are not that unique. Actually, they are pretty much the same as everybody else.
Which do you side with?
Well, I think as a good Swiss, I'd like to be right in the middle. Which is, I think that the uniqueness of Japanese are in the fact that they believe they are unique. This is where they really differ.
You mean we want to believe that we are
I think, yeah, it's not only you want to, I think you utterly believe that you are different. But there is another more, there's a deeper difference, I think, which is in terms of concept of life. Westerners are basically dualistic. I mean, the subject is always in opposition with the object. We always do confront everything. Whereas Asian, generally speaking, and Japanese are, of course, dealing with that dualistic image of the subject and the object, but with always seeing and dealing with the background of oneness. And this is really basically where the difference starts. It's not so much in terms of behavior, and because this is learned. We learned our behavior, you learned yours. But the major difference, I think, is the concept of how you relate more to the total environment. And whereas we are more always sort of confronting it, I think this is where it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, earlier we talked about the Japanese image, that of more or less an, not quite economic animal, but something characterized by the successful export of the Japanese products. We do not really want to think ourselves as an economic animal, but it is also true that there is a strong tendency in modern-day Japan for the pursuit of materialistic goal. How do you view that as a foreigner?
Well, the way I think I would suggest is probably out of two things. The number one is an obvious one. After the war, there was practically nothing. And like Germany, you had to start from scratch. So, and Japan has shown in her history how fast and how dramatically she can sort of turn. I mean, 180 degrees angles, the Meiji Restoration, and then the Second World and other things. But what happened is that you had to rebuild the country. And in doing so, due to the structure of society, the tribal society, it's either you do something in one direction and everybody does it, or you do it in another directions. Where you did it in terms of building and reconstructing the whole country economy and so forth. So it was probably inevitable to go all the way through, because if the whole group is going one direction, and with the shall we say basic democratic rules, then one can expect such a success. The second reason why Japanese are pursuing materialism, I think, is probably to be found in what we are talking about today. It's their own identity. You have, I think, a period of transition between what I call the children's religion and an adult's religion. The children's religion would be understanding and believing, whereas the adult's religions would be realization. I mean, practice first, and realization and actualization of that. I think it's where maybe Japan is going now. You are in the process of doing that, and religiousness, if I can adapt it to economical term, then provokes a sort of trust for materialistic phenomena, and ends up quite naturally in consumerism.
I see. Now, I guess we have reached the stage where we have enough of materialistic, I think, achievement. Do you think that having achieved that, we would probably come to seek more spiritual and ideological goals?
Well, this is, I think yes. I would venture to say yes. I don't have the answer really, but I believe not only you, but it's probably worthwhile. We've gone through that consumerism, that materialism, and it definitively doesn't satisfy anybody, because you can only wear one pair of shoes at the time, and having like Imelda Marcos 3,000 pair of shoes becomes odd at a certain time, right? So I think although the perceptions of philosophy, religion is different in the West than in the East, one is definitively going through at least the first period of seeking something extra materialism. Probably the direction is religion, philosophy, or a more abstract goal rather than just fighting for another watch or another car or something.
But another thing that bothers us in terms of our identity in the world is that we are an Asian country, but our probably attention is more likely to be directed toward the United States and Europe, and our economic activities also are spread all over the world. So we do not really know whether we should identify ourselves as Asian, or sometimes we say Japan is a member of the Western Bloc, which is not necessarily, not quite the Asia.
Yeah.
So, viewed from outside, how do you see us? You see us as an Asian, and do you think we should more closely identify ourselves with Asian?
Personally, I don't think that, nothing that I've read or nothing that I've seen or experienced myself contradict what I'm saying now, is that I don't think that it is possible at all for human beings to escape their own environment. No matter what, you always will be the product of your environment. You can dress differently, you can do whatever you want to, you will stay what you are. I will stay a European before everything else. And I doubt that Japanese would be anything else but Japanese. And I think this is where the first crisis of identity comes from, is in Japan you have, if I'm not mistaken, these on expressions, which means, among other things, the depth. And it occurs to me only recently that maybe one of the reasons why Japanese are so eager to copy, say, what comes from America may originate in what happened after the war. Because in Asia, a gesture or a small gift may start a whole procedures of gift exchange or endless sort of relationship. It might be there where Japanese started to lose it in a certain way. We can see that the changes of the society now in terms of today's generation doesn't like anymore the idea of being just an interchangeable part in society. Women are going under a real sort of what I would call an underground revolution. So although there are changes, and maybe dramatic changes, I don't think that the answer is either in the States or in Europe or even in China. Your unlikely brothers. The answer is here in Japan. And I don't think that Japan can change any other way than by themselves, by Japanese. You can progress, you can change whatever you want to, but as long as it's done by Japanese for Japanese and inside of the Japanese mores. I doubt that being assimilated as Americans, and I don't think that you would like too much to be amalgamated and be taken or mistaken for Americans or Europeans in many other
That
ways.
is true, but it looks like you mean to say that we should go back to our own tradition or the so-called Japaneseness. However, the root of Japaneseness is something that we discarded, after the World War II, because that, after all, led to the defeat in the World War II. So it is difficult for us to seek our identity in our own Japaneseness. So that may be the reason that we reacted, and ended up with almost identifying ourselves with the West.
This is, I think, why Mr. Nakasone was and is still so popular in Japan, and at least with the Japanese people. I'm not sure he's that popular with his own party members, but I think that the Japanese people do identify with Nakasone behavior and Nakasone's idea. They really like it, in the sense that what you say is very true. Japan as such, Japanese society has gone astray after the war because of many things. I mean, Americans, when they arrived here, made Japan swallow literally a constitution, which probably would never have been done that same way by Japanese themselves. Americans also unbalanced the rules of politics and leadership when they, for instance, in order to have Japan out of the militaristic notions that they were under since so many times, they sort of backed, and it's very strange that America would do that, but they really backed the left, socialist, communist, absolutely everything was done for the purpose of tipping the balance towards democracy. And yes, it has a shift from that stage on, but as we can see with what Mr. Nakasone is doing, and I'm not saying we either like it or dislike it, what he's done is what he's done, but with his Sengo no Soke-san, I think it was very clear that he wanted to go back to pre-war values, which I would probably see as the cult of the emperor and the family society, I would call that. I'm not quite sure that this is something feasible. I don't think that you can go against the time. You never go backwards. You always you flow with the river. But
well, since you have brought up this subject of Mr. Nakasone, I would like to ask you why he is so popular among foreigners. Maybe he is more popular overseas than in here. What is his attraction to?
This is interesting, because if I was interviewing you, I would have asked you the same questions the other way around, actually. It seems that we think that he's popular with you, Japanese, and you seem to think that he's popular with us. We view him as a really an Asian leader, and on the other hand, I now came to realize that you don't view him as an Asian most of the time. He looks a little bit more like an American to a tea ceremony for you, or a European going to a Zen Buddhist temple and becoming a monk. But maybe his popularity, both sides of the ocean, comes from that. Is that probably he was a very good and is a very good catalyzer and bridge between the two cultures. It seems that it's probably a little bit easier to talk to him being a westernized Japanese for Western leaders, and it seems that he is probably more helpful for Japan in the Western world because his abilities to understand. For instance, Mr. Nakasone never bows; he always shakes hands, and I think maybe both sides. It's a good image.
Well, he is. I think he is more articulate than average Japanese, and he speaks out more clearly and strongly. While the conventional image of the Japanese leadership is to follow the consensus rather than to speak himself articulately. I think that's at least one of the things that made him popular overseas. Do you think that would be a desirable goal for the Japanese to pursue, to be more accurate and outspoken?
I think yes. I'm not saying that one should get rid of the consensus, because this, I think, is a quite marvelous way of ruling a society. But Japan is a leader and might become the world leader, at least in certain fields and in certain ways. And I'm sure Japan must come to realizations that that role should be assumed rather than rejected. I don't know if the next Prime Minister would have the charisma that Nakasone had, but I certainly hope that he will have the clairvoyance of being very accurate and being very aware of what Japan is and what really Japan means, which is perceived in the West in a very strong way. I mean, it's a very powerful power, it's a very rich power, and one cannot just accept that it doesn't play that role.
Mm. Well, I think this question of who we are, where our real identity lies, is not going to be resolved soon. The changes for Japanese since the World War II have been so great. I think this matter of seeking our identity is going to continue for some time. And I hope that you also will continue to be interested in us and talking about us, because I think that will make a very interesting discussion.
We'll stay until we know really who you are and how you changed.
That's right. Thank you very much, Mr. Vellino. We enjoyed very much.
Thank you very much.
Very interesting
Pleasure.
discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.